Hi, welcome to the Pastor's Wife podcast. In episode 6 today, I sit down with Leah Hendrickson, the wife of Daniel Hendrickson from Calvary Chapel, Palos Verdes. In this episode, Leah shares with us how the Lord called them to church plant right before COVID hit. And in this episode, Leah shares with us their journey to Palos Verdes and all that the Lord is doing in their church. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Leah, why don't you say hi to our studio audience?
Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here. This is my first official ever podcast, so I'm a little nervous, but I'm also very excited.
Oh, we're so excited to have you. Now, Leah and I just officially met maybe a couple days ago, but we have a mutual friend who are missionaries in Peru, Danielle, and she actually did Kilgis. Danielle Kilgis, and we interviewed her
on season 1, I think, or on season 1, maybe.
It was when we weren't doing the podcast. It was the lives.
Yes.
On when we went Facebook or Instagram live.
Yes.
On the CCA Pastor's Wife channel, and so Danielle was telling me all about Leah and just her and her husband and their story, and I just had to meet Leah, and I'm just so excited we were able to interview her. So she's going to tell us her story, and this is the first time I'm hearing it, so I'm so excited to do this with you. So let's just jump into it. Leah, tell us how you came to know the Lord. Let's start there. How you met the Lord.
Totally. So I'm actually a missionary's kid. I'm a pastor's kid. I was born in Central California in a small, tiny Swedish town named Kingsburg. And I grew up in a Christian household. My dad was the youth pastor there. And from a really young age, I just remember when I was 4 or 5, sitting on a bed at nighttime, talking with my mom before we were going to bed, and it was probably either the Sunday school lesson of the day or maybe something that was said in preschool that day. But I just remember saying, I want Jesus to be in my heart forever. And so she sat with me, and that's when I accepted Jesus. And then when I was 4, my parents became missionaries. So they are career missionaries. They're actually still in Colombia, South America. They retire in, like 8 to 10 months in 2025. And so I grew up in Colombia, and I grew up in Bogota, and I grew up in Medellin. So I got to see firsthand, all growing up, just miracles. I got to see, my parents were church planters. We worked alongside many pastors and families, and I just got to see the wonders and the beauties of a different culture, and just that helped grow my faith from a very young age. So for as long as I can remember, I've been a Christian, and yeah.
No, that's amazing. The Lord captured your heart from a very, very young age, and clearly had a plan for your life. And so how long were you in Colombia? How long, from what age to what age?
So we moved there when I was 4, and I lived there until I was 18 to go to college. So I moved back to California to go to college. I went to UC Davis up north near Sacramento. We chose California because I'm one of 4 kids, and my oldest sister, love her so dearly, is kind of bossy. And so she chose California to go to college, and she told us siblings, like, listen, we're going to be by ourselves, and so everybody needs to be in California so we can be together. So that kind of just transitioned all of us to come to California for college.
So then how do you come to California for college? When do you meet Daniel?
So I didn't know. I mean, I grew up as a missionary kid in a huge city, and Medellin has like 5 million people. And so when we decided to come to California for college, I had no idea about any of the application process. I didn't know if it was easy, if it was hard. Just my other sisters got into colleges, so I was like, well, I'm going to apply to get into colleges. And so, yeah, I got into UC Davis. I lived near my sister who was going to Berkeley. And I knew, though, as well from a really young age, my mom is a teacher. She was a teacher before she was a missionary. And so growing up, I loved kids, and so I knew that I wanted to be a teacher. So I went to UC Davis for human development with an emphasis in child development, and then I got my teaching credential and my master's there. And then at that point, my brother lived in Santa Barbara. He was going to Westmont College, and I really wanted to be near my brother, so I applied to a dual immersion program. It was called Adelante Charter School, and I didn't get it my first year, and I was devastated. And so I found another dual immersion program near San Francisco, And I lived there for a year. It was my first year teaching, and it was such an instrumental year in my walk with the Lord. It was basically just me and Jesus for a year. And I plugged into a church out there, a young adults group, which is why young adults are so special to me, because I had an amazing mentor my year when I was a young adult that really poured into me and really helped fortify my walk with the Lord. And then a year later, a position opened back up in Santa Barbara at Adelante Charter School. And so I applied again. And that year I got accepted and I moved down to Santa Barbara. And kind of knowing that if I had moved to Santa Barbara a year earlier, I don't know if I really would have met Daniel, if I would have been in the right place to meet someone new, to start a relationship. But I went to Santa Barbara feeling so sure of who I was in the Lord, and so ready to whatever my next relationship was going to be one that I knew that God would be in, and that it would be someone that would lead me and would be a godly relationship and a strong godly relationship. And so I met Daniel 10 months into living in Santa Barbara through the most random way. He, at that point, was working in restaurants. And so he was his manager. I met his manager through, because he was married. I met the wife.
Right.
And he came home and she was hosting a get together, and he came home from work, this manager, and he decided he wanted to play matchmaker, and I was the only single person at this get together. And so he was like, "Oh, I have this really tall, blonde, handsome surfer that works for me. You should totally date him." And I was like, "No, that's okay." And he's like, "No, he's so nice and he's like so great." And I was like, he wasn't a Christian. And so I was like, I'm a Christian. Like, I want to be dating someone that is a Christian. He's like, "He's so nice. He's totally a Christian." So
he has to be, right?
He has to be, because he's nice. And I remember just being like, "Sure." I'm like, "No, that's okay, but thanks so much." He goes back to his restaurant and he tells Daniel, he's like, "Listen, I found a girl for you to date. She's so nice. She's a Christian and she's a teacher." And Daniel was like, "I don't want to date any of the girls that you would want to set me up with."
Oh, no.
And so that was just what he thought was the end of it. I thought was the end of it. For 2 months, this sweet manager, he would try through my mutual friends to get me to come in to the restaurant. He determined. He was like, and finally he basically bribed them. He's like, "I will buy your entire meal if you bring this girl into the restaurant."
No way.
So they were like, "Leah, we're going to go to the Wine Cask." Shout out to the Wine Cask. And I was like, "Okay." And then as I was getting there, my friend was like, "Hey, by the way, you remember that one time, like months ago, when he mentioned that server that works for him?" He was actually an expediter, but the server that works for him. And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, he's going to be serving our table and he's here and he looks really nice, and please still come." And I was like, "Okay."
Oh, you got set up.
So we got set up. The entire restaurant knew that, the entire wait staff knew it was happening. Right. My whole friend group I was with knew it was happening. It was super awkward. But at the end of the night, we crossed paths, and he was like, "Hey, I'd love to get to your number and maybe take you out to coffee." And I was like, "Well, it's Easter, so I'm really busy this weekend."
It's Easter.
And he was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm really busy this weekend too." And so, but yeah, he called me the following Monday, and we went out to coffee, and we talked for 3 hours, and we just laid it all out on the table on the first 3 hours of where we were coming from, our relationship with the Lord, what we would be looking for in any potential relationship. And yeah, it was the most intense 3-hour conversation I've ever had, but it was also such a breath of fresh air. Mm-hmm. And from that day on, we hung out and we started dating right away. And we got married about a year later. We got engaged. He came to Colombia, to Medellin, that's where I was. And he proposed down in Colombia with my whole family there.
So beautiful.
And then we got married May of 2012.
Wow.
So we just celebrated 12 years this last year. So.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah. Thanks.
That's amazing. So Daniel is a server at this restaurant. He's walking with the Lord.
Mm-hmm. He was just about to, so Daniel got saved at Calvary Santa Barbara when he was 17. He likes to say, so Calvary Santa Barbara, they have a half pipe in their high school room. Mm-hmm. And so he was invited by actually the pastor's daughter, because they went to high school together.
Okay.
She's like, you should just come check out my youth group. There's a half pipe. He was a skater and a surfer. And so he was like, okay. And so he came. So he says like he came for the skate ramp and for the girls, but he stayed for Jesus. And so, yeah, he got saved there a year later. Jesus radically transformed his life. Like the direction he was going went in a completely different way. And then did that senior year. And then as soon as he was out of high school, he stayed and he did the college group. And then he started serving in the youth ministry. So then he was a youth leader for many years. And right as I met him, he was about to transition to be like the assistant youth pastor, which was in 2011.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you get married.
We get married.
You're living in California?
We're living in California, in Santa Barbara. I'm teaching. He's the youth pastor at Calvary Santa Barbara. And he did that for 7 years or so. And then in about 2018, everything kind of started shifting for us.
Let's talk about that shift.
Okay. So in 2018, David Guzik, who was our senior pastor at Calvary Santa Barbara, he decided to shift and focus more on enduring word. Right. And he was still teaching pastors in Santa Barbara, but they brought Tommy Schneider and his wife, Debbie Schneider, back to Calvary Chapel, Santa Barbara. So they came in I know this because my son was 10 months old, so 2017. Otherwise, I wouldn't know dates. In 2017, and right as Tommy started getting there, he met with all of the current staff, and he just met with them one-on-one and kind of asked, like, what's your heart? Like, where do you see the Lord, the Lord doing in your life? And Daniel, when we first met on our second date, we were fishing off of a pier in Goleta. He was like, I feel like I know the Lord has called me to ministry for my life. And I don't know what it will look like. Right now I'm going to be stepping into being a youth pastor, and he loved high schoolers. And he was like, I don't know how long I will do that, but I hope one day the Lord will give me an opportunity to pastor at a church. And so he's like, but I don't know when. So I mean, on our second date, I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. He's like, well, how do you feel about that? I was like, well, my dad was a youth pastor. I've been in ministry. My parents have been in ministry my entire life. And so I was like, well, I think it's funny because my mom was a teacher and I'm a teacher. And my dad was a youth pastor before he became a missionary and a pastor. And you're a youth pastor. I'm like, I just think it's funny how God works, that like teacher, youth pastor, and then the next generation teacher, another youth pastor. So similar. So fast forward again to 2017, and Daniel and Tommy meet, and he's just like, I have loved high school. I don't want to go anywhere. But he shared what was on his heart. He said, one day I hope to plant a church or to pastor a church. And so a couple years later, Daniel had an opportunity to become one of the associate pastors for Calvary Chapel Santa Barbara with the intention of, I want to teach you how to shepherd so that you can go and shepherd.
I love it.
And so I was so scared when that was happening, to be honest, because I was like, oh no, like I loved our life in Santa Barbara. I loved the school I taught at. My daughter was just about to start going into kindergarten at the school I taught at for almost, at that point, 8 or 9 years. And so I was like, I knew that was going to happen at some point, but I thought it was so far down the road. And so when he moved into the associate position with the intention of, let's raise you up to want to go out. Yeah. I was like, wait, I was like, wait, I thought that was like 10 years down the road. And he's like, well, it's probably not, Leah. I was like, oh my gosh. Okay. So it was actually similar to what you and I had talked about prior. It was actually at a pastor's wife's conference. I was just going over my notes about it because I have it in my same journal. It was in 2018 or 19, but it was at one of those conferences that I was really wrestling. It was like as this transitioning was happening, I was really wrestling with like, Lord, but that's not what was my timeline. Like I thought I would maybe have more time in Santa Barbara. And it was during one of the sessions. And actually, I feel like it was Sandy McIntosh was leading it because she did the same thing. Like, we're going to pray over certain aspects. Right. And it was like, she said, if you are struggling with relinquishing control of where God is bringing you next, stand up, I want to pray for you. And I had shared it with the group that I was with, and my whole group turned and looked at me, and I was just like, I could just so clearly feel the Lord being like, Leah, you need to relinquish this to me. I have better plans for you. And so Sorry, I'm also a crier. So if I cry,
No.
okay.
This is
Just as,
it's just it's so relatable, the process you're walking through,
yeah,
as that you're leading us through right now, because the Lord sometimes brings us to these churches. We fall in love with the people.
yeah,
Our children get integrated into the church, and we just begin to live lives with these people and love them and connect with them. And then when we know that the Lord is calling us out, there is that struggle of, Lord, I love these people.
yes,
My children have their home here.
yes,
And you want to take us like out of it. It's sometimes, I know when we walked through that as a family, I drug my feet.
yeah,
I didn't want to leave our home church, and it was very, very challenging, but the Lord is so gentle.
oh, it's so good.
And he's like, and he allows us to work through those things, and he eventually like works to capture our heart and to relinquish that. But I don't feel like he's, well, like, okay, because you didn't go the first time, or like the opportunity's gone, or because he's just really gentle to work with our hearts.
Yeah, yeah. So agreed. And so I think that for me, that moment or that time of just really intentionally, I think it switched something in my heart that I just started intentionally praying, like, Lord, prepare my heart, because I know that you're calling us to do this. I don't know when, but I know that you are. And so instead of like that, it was like, instead of dragging my feet, because I still have more dragging than I did, I'll be honest with you. But instead of dragging my feet so hard, it was just like, okay, I'm going to take the next step forward and the next step forward. And so, so that was in the fall of like 2018, I think. We had a couple more years. And then, actually, not even a couple more years, the following year, Daniel had another meeting, and they're like, okay, Daniel, like, we really want to talk to you about, where do you feel like the Lord is calling you? Tell us about that. And so Daniel, for years, had Palos Verdes Peninsula on his heart. And the Palos Verdes Peninsula is this amazing, sweet little place. It's like a green blip on, I like to say, like a green area on, like, surrounded by like concrete jungle. So
that's a good way to describe it.
Yeah. So if you look at it on a map, the Palos Verdes Peninsula, it's just like a little, it's a peninsula.
Yeah.
But it's special to Daniel because his grandparents and his parents were born and raised there. Okay. And he didn't come from a Christian family. And so when his parents were growing up, his parents were, Easter, Christmas, special occasions, would go to church. And so would his parents, but they didn't really have a relationship with the Lord. And when he was just praying about where the Lord wanted to bring us as a family to church plant, Palos Verdes just kept coming up and coming up. And it was not coming up for me. I was like, I wanted to go either north, or I wanted to maybe go to a different state, see a different area of the United States. And he just kept saying, Leah, the Lord is calling. I believe the Lord is calling us to Palos Verdes for so many reasons. But one is to plant a church in a place that didn't have a church, or a Calvary. There's lots of churches there, lots of great churches, but there's not a Calvary on the Palos Verdes Peninsula. And he said, I want to go and plant a Calvary where there hasn't been a Calvary, to redeem that for my family. Yeah. And so, so we started praying about that. And like I said, now I love Los Angeles. Yeah. But a couple years ago, I was like, there's traffic. It's so busy all the time. Like, it takes hours to get there. Like, I was just thinking of all like the logistical, silly things you think of as a mom, I think. And, but the Lord, again, was so kind and so gentle. And I told Daniel, I was like, Daniel, if you have to drag me to this, you're going to have to drag me through this. And I just want to, he's like, I want to pray that the Lord will change. He's like, I can't change your heart about it. Yeah. Only God can. And so we started praying for that. And through a few amazing times of prayer, and we were at a young adults worship night that one of our friends was leading, and the Lord just spoke so clearly to me through Esther of your people will be you're my people, and your God will be my God. And I told Daniel, I was like, okay, Daniel, I will follow you where you want to go. And I believe that God is calling us together. Mm-hmm. And so a couple months later, in January of 2020, we went on a vision and prayer trip saying, well, we'll go first to the Palos Verdes area. We'll go to Palos Verdes, we'll see what the Lord has there, and then we'll go other places and see. And my prayer and my heart for when we went was just like, Lord, I know you're calling us to do a big thing. Yeah. And so I was like, Lord, I want you to meet me. I want you to, because hold on, let me rephrase that. I didn't say it like that. I said, will you meet me in small areas that mean a lot to me? Mm. And so I was a teacher. Spanish is my heart language. And I was like, I want to be able to speak Spanish wherever we go. And so the first morning at the first coffee shop that we walked up to, in not a Spanish, like, dominant speaking community, these two men are having a full conversation in Spanish, and then you walk in and the person in front of me was talking in Spanish, and then the people that were asking for my order were also speaking in Spanish, and I was like an emotional mess. I was just like, oh, could I have a coffee, please? And then later that day, small things, like later that day when I was in Half Moon Bay, my first year, the year that I was just like me and God, I had a bench that I would go to and I'd pray and I'd journal at all the time. And so I was walking at this park where we thought maybe, it was a community center. It's called Hess Park. So maybe this was where we'll launch. And so I walked up to the top where there was another grassy area, and I walked out and there was a bench that was overlooking the city. And I was like, I just could feel God say, like, look, I have a bench for you here where you can come and pray and meet with me. And it was these small little things that meant so much to my heart. And so at the end of the week, we had Pastor Tommy and his wife and Pastor Brett and his wife. They came down and we prayed over the whole peninsula, and we were like, there was lots of confirmations of like, okay, we feel like this is it. We feel like the Lord is calling you here. It's been confirmed, and let's continue to pray for that. And we'll launch in July of 2020. And then COVID hit.
Yeah, I was like, what was February 2020? And then 1 month later.
1 month later, the world shut down. And literally we all experienced it. The world, sorry. I move with my hands. I'm Latina. I'm like, blah, blah, blah.
No, I already walked it once too.
But yeah, the world shut down. And so before that, we were having prayer meetings. There were a few people from our church that were considering coming with us. And we were starting to look into places we could potentially rent. And then March came, everything shut down. And we were just at a standstill. Mm-hmm. And so it had already been announced to our church that we were church planning, that we were going to be moving to Palos Verdes. This was before COVID had just hit. And then we just stopped. And we had a conversation with our pastoral staff, and they're like, you do not need to leave in July of 2020. Like, please stay as long, like, who knows what's going to happen with this pandemic. Like, don't think that you need to go. You have a home here until you're ready to go. And so then our prayer just became, Lord, we need big steps. And we are ready. We are taking a leap of faith, but we need you to guide our steps. And so over a series of crazy, only God can do things, instead of moving in July of 2020, we moved at the end of May of 2020. Much sooner. We found an apartment. My job was like, you can teach from anywhere. We're all at home, so wherever home is, you can teach from there. So I was able to finish out my school year. And so on Memorial Day weekend of 2020, we packed up our family. We got to our apartment. The staff came and like unloaded our van, and then they said goodbye. And it was just Daniel, myself, my daughter Kennedy, and my son Caleb. There was just the four of us. We knew no one, but we knew that God had been calling us there. And so over the course of 8 weeks, I think, our prayer was really simple. My prayer was just like, Lord, whoever you put in my path today, give me the courage to speak to them. Give me the courage to talk to them. Like, COVID, it was such an interesting time, especially in a new community where you knew no one. Like, just people's boundaries or talking or even meeting people. But God was so, so good. Like, I met some of my closest friends that I had during that season of life. Many of them have now since moved away. But because of that prayer. Like we'd run into each other as we were walking our kids around a park. Or I started this play date on Mondays and I posted it on a Facebook community group. And I just said, hey, if anyone wants, like, I'll provide a craft. Like I'm a teacher, I'll provide a craft and we can just get to know each other. And we called it Mom Mondays. And it was just an opportunity to meet people in the community and invite them to a church that we would be starting, that we didn't have a launch date. We didn't know where it was going to be, but we got to start making those connections. My husband went surfing every day, and it was like through surfing that he reconnected with an old acquaintance in Santa Barbara who connected him to a pastor, who connected him to another pastor, who connected him to the Young Life director, who connected him to this small church, which it was called Life on the Hill, that was pastored by 3 pastors, lay pastors. So one's a surgeon and 2 of them were lawyers. And they would just they would pastor this small church, Life on the Hill. And he was like, they're so great. I'm sure they will give you, because everything was shut down. We had nowhere we could rent from. And he's like, I'm sure they would, I rent from them for Young Life. I'm sure they would maybe give you, let you use the building on Sunday nights or Saturday nights once stuff kind of opens back up. And then through the way that only God works, Daniel met with the pastors. He shared the vision of of planting a Calvary chapel there. And the Holy Spirit just met with them and was just like, we would love to offer you the building. We'd love to have you guys be here. And we're like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And then it turned into, actually, we would love to plant this church alongside you.
What?
And so here's a building. We have to meet outside because you couldn't be inside at that point. But like, here's a building. Here's 3 more pastors that will be on staff with you. Here's the keys to the building. Here's everything that we have. We would love to do this alongside you guys. It was, telling it sounds crazy.
Yeah.
But knowing the way that the Lord works, it's not crazy, you know?
The Lord was already preparing the path for you.
Yeah. And there's something sweet that one of our pastors says. He said, we pastored this small church for 10 years. He said, and I believe that it was even just to hold on to this so that when the time was ready, we had a small but well-fed serving flock that was ready to come alongside us to launch this church. So we just celebrated 4 years, two weekends ago.
Wow, God is so good.
Yeah, and so we just went to 3 services 2 weeks ago. It's been growing and expanding, and it's crazy.
You know what I love about your story is that you integrated into the community first.
Yeah.
And you were getting to know the people and loving on the people. And it was just like one step at a time. Yeah. And I think that is just so special that you got to have that time to really just, okay, Lord, who do you want to bring into our past? Who do you want us to connect with? All while the Lord had this church waiting for you guys there.
Yeah.
And if you wouldn't have taken that step of faith.
Yeah.
Like, who knows what would have happened?
When we were there in January, one of the nights, Daniel and I, we sat at this kitchen table and we had this butcher paper and we wrote out what would we call the church and maybe who's going to come with us and where should we go and where should we lunch and how are we going to do it with the budget we were given. And we still need to frame it. We still have it. But every year around the anniversary, we open it back up.
Yeah.
And we look at like what we thought our plans were. And then we see what God has done. And, it's like God will do more than you can ever hope, pray for, or imagine.
Absolutely.
In order to give glory to his church, And so it's mind-boggling every year that we see it because we're like, oh man, we thought we were prepared and we thought we knew and we thought that the Lord was, but God had something so much bigger. And so when times, church planning, when times get a little bit fast-paced or busy or just days get a little long, even though it's the biggest blessing ever, and I would not change it for the world, it's a good reminder to be like, this is what you thought, and this is what God has done. And so that's kind of my little prayer, my small prayer that I always do. I just say, just do it, Lord. Just do it. Like big things, small things, Lord, you do it. You do it in your will, and I will follow you where you're going. So.
And he's so faithful to like even meet like how you just wanted to be able to speak Spanish wherever you're at. Just those little things to show like I'm with you and I'm here.
Yeah.
And it increases our faith for the bigger things that come along because, you know, when you're uprooting your family to a new place, church planning, there's a lot of difficulties that come along and you want to know that God was the one that told you to go.
Yeah.
That you didn't go for any other reason except like this is what God has called us to because that's what keeps us, you know, in those difficult times. We can always go back to, okay, Lord, you brought us here. You are going to complete the work you started.
Yes. It's like you're taking the words out of my mouth. Like that is literally, as you know, that's my prayer all the time. I'm like, Lord, you brought us here. Like, Lord, this is, you already know of this situation. You already know, like when we were talking about going from 2 services to 3 services, like, Lord, it's gonna stretch our servants. It's going to stretch the people that serve for us. It's going to allow new people to come in. It's going to be logistically, it's going to cause some stuff. But like, Lord, you called us here. You know this situation. And so you are going to be good to solve it and to fix it and to lead us where we're supposed to go.
I've known the Lord to really set the pace for not only my family, my husband, but the church.
Yeah.
And like what we can handle and how much we can handle. And he's been so faithful, even in the times where it's like, okay, Lord, that seems like a really big step.
Yeah.
But he's been so faithful to meet us and to fill in the gap. But as I've always just prayed, Lord, you set the pace because I try to orchestrate, make the plans, and it just, you know, his plans are just so much better.
Yeah. So much better. So much better than you could ever think, ask, or imagine. Like it's mind-boggling. And to think that, you know, it's so humbling for me to be like, Lord, you chose us to do this for you, you know? Like sometimes I think we get so caught up in our little bubble, but then, and they forget about the whole world that's around you. And then, but also just be like, Lord, you chose Daniel and I for this time, for this purpose to do this. And it's humbling.
No, it is the most humbling thing to know that the Lord has called you and to a specific place, and he had a specific flock for you.
Yeah.
And, you know, wherever you're at in the world, the Lord has called, you know, the pastors' wives and leaders that are listening, and the Lord has called them to a specific place, a specific ministry, and he wants to use their lives. And, but I love that reminder because I think it always keeps us in check what you just said, that, like, the Lord doesn't need us.
Yeah.
And like I always remind myself, if I don't go, there's somebody else that he'll send. Yeah. And I want to know what God has. Yeah. I want all that God has.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but he's again so faithful in those. When we're faithless, he is faithful. He remains the same. And he's just so tender and sweet to like gently lead us and to lead our families. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thanks for having me.
We are going to be praying for your church,
Thank
for
you.
Daniel and your family. And I know that your story is just so encouraging, and just to see God's faithfulness in your life and the leading and the guiding of it. I can't wait to see what the next 8, 10, 12 years look for Calvary Chapel Palos Verdes.
Thank
so
you.
Excited. Thank you
so much for having me.
Of course. It was so fun. Thank you for tuning in to our podcast. We are just so blessed to have you all listening. We pray that you are encouraged by these stories and that your faith is strengthened, and we will see you the next time.